I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year zero. Well, we're on day 5,000, I think, of this whole coronavirus thing. I don't know. I don't even know what day it is anymore. I feel like the zombie apocalypse has come, and I have one of my favorite people in the world to talk to, Miss Sherry Voluntary, because I want to talk about being an adult and a parent during this period of time.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Tommy. I appreciate it. It's always great to come on your show.
Oh, well, probably should have waited for a more upbeat time, but you always make me feel better about things because you're so
Thanks.
positive.
Well, you caught me on a good day. I've had my days.
Hey, well, you're a redhead. I would hate to catch you on a bad day. My mom's a redhead. I know how that goes.
Right.
So,
Can be rough.
what is the coronavirus uh, environment like for the Sherry Voluntary household?
Well, we are going about our business um, as much as possible, but I'm staying at home as much as I can. If I need to go out, I go out, but I'm not. I'm just I'm taking the middle of the road approach, right? Like,
Mm,
not everything the authorities are telling everyone is incorrect, but not everything they're saying is correct either, I think. So, I'm just taking it all in with a grain of salt and being cautious. Better to, be a little cautious than to be reckless. So that's sort of the situation here. I already homeschool, so it's not really an issue. My daughter, who is 9, has been like, she was all happy about it. She goes to a co-op that's 2.5 days a week, a little homeschool co-op, and the only thing she's missed now is her friends. Now she's starting to go, when am I going to get to see my friends again? And we've been doing some little Skype calls, and things like that, so she can hang out with them.
right.
Um, but other than that, our life isn't all that different at the moment.
Yeah. Now, okay, so you're taking these and one thing I'm trying to, I guess I should clarify this. One thing I'm trying to do during this whole period is my natural point of view on things like this, especially when the media is amplifying the this fear mongering, is
Yeah, the
is
hysteria.
yeah. I step back and I try to be dispassionate about it, but
Yes,
I'm always skeptical about these things because it's
right.
like, okay, like what are y'all trying to? Why are y'all trying to get us to operate in this manner? Like, what are you trying to
Mhm.
accomplish? What does it do for you?
Right.
And so when it comes to your daughter, and I don't know if she has some sort of compromised immune system or respiratory system or something like that,
No.
but um, when you're looking at parenting and dealing with your kids and not allowing your kids to to kind of like social distance, the buzzword of the day, um, and staying away from their friends, are you looking at it from, well, my daughter, though she may be asymptomatic because she's perfectly healthy, she might spread it to somebody within my family who has a compromised immune system? Or are you worried about her contracting it to her friends? Or are you actually like, have you seen studies or some evidence that maybe this is worse for children than what we're being led to believe?
No, it's mostly because the other parents don't want to have their kids hang out right now. Um, the last person I'm concerned about getting it, honestly, is my daughter, who's
Mm,
very healthy, and 9 years old, and my son, who's 17. Like, I don't, I haven't heard that it's been particularly more devastating for healthy children. Now, very young infants, maybe, I don't know. But that's the thing about this whole thing, is it's hard to get real numbers and to know what's right, because there are so many sources of contradictory information. And I think that helps to heighten the fear of people. That, for me, that's, my thinking is, I don't know what the truth is, right? And sometimes we can look at all the information that's out there, but it still doesn't really give us the actual what is going on. So I'm not quite sure what to believe about it. I don't think that it's as um, crazy as the media would lead you to believe, but I do think that there could be a possibility of hospitals getting overloaded. So my thinking is I'm going to do what I need to do, but if I don't have to go and, you know, get my hair done or something, I'm not going to do that just because I don't want to take the chance of getting it, and I probably wouldn't get sick to the point that I'd need to go to the hospital if I did get it
Hmm.
because I'm relatively healthy. So, but in the off chance that I might get that sick, I'm just trying to avoid that because the hospitals, they only have so much capacity and all that. So I'm just trying to take a, like you said, step back. I think that's always the best thing to do, especially when the fear narrative is being pushed, is always take a step back, get your head out of it for a minute and look at it from 10,000 feet, and go, okay, what's going on here? Who are the players and what's the messaging that they're sending and why? And I definitely think that the media has been hyping this in a way as to make people more scared. And I don't think that the government planned this. I don't think it was like something they released. I mean, I don't know, but that's from what I get. I don't think that's the case, but I think they are definitely taking advantage of the situation. And I also think that this probably isn't the time that's going to be, when the stuff hits the fan. Like, I think this is, if it's anything, it's probably a dry run
Hmm.
to see how much power people will just hand over to them. Because look, they're like anyone else. They would rather take the path of least resistance, right? Like that's every institution, organization, whatever is incentivized. We want to take the path of least resistance. We want to get the most for the least effort. And so I think if they can get people afraid enough and they realize, oh, we're talking about suspending the Constitution. I mean, you and I know that document doesn't do much for us anyways, but that gives them, in most people's eyes, free reign to do whatever they want. And so I've seen people talking about that, and articles talking about, Congress considering that already. And that's pretty scary when you think about most people will just hand it over and be glad they did. Like they feel more secure and safe knowing that daddy government has all the power now to just do what it needs to do. And if that means trampling a few folks, well, maybe I'll still be safe. And that's the scariest part to me is people's mindsets and the economic fallout. And I think that this may be just a test run, and it also will discredit a lot of us who say, look, you can't trust the government, you can't trust the state. Their solutions are bad. They make things worse. I think if they had something like that where they took, say, had lockdowns that were very severe, like in some places, and then they gave all that power back to people, and they would go, okay, well, see, they don't want to lord over us. They just want to protect us. And then the next time when they take it, they have free reign to do that, and they're not giving it back. So that's just, that's maybe a little conspiratorial, and I'm not generally a conspiracy theory type, but I'm not stupid either, and I know that there are elements within the state that would love nothing more than to, go full police state. So I'm
Well,
trying not to be naive or too scared. It's hard to walk the middle.
yeah, and I don't think you have to be conspiratorial
Yeah.
to look at history and say, okay, every time the government has taken mass action. I mean, you just go back. I hear a lot of people saying 9/11, and you look
Mhm.
at the Patriot Act and all the surveillance and the spying and everything that came after 9/11. You don't have
Yep.
to be a conspiracy theorist. to recognize that the government is looking to get more power. They're always
Yeah.
looking to get more power, and that when it's the ratchet effect, as a lot of people have been pointing out, that they might give you
Mhm.
some of your freedoms back, quote unquote freedoms back. They might
Right.
give you some of these little privileges back, but it's never going back to how it was. It will never
Exactly.
go back to how it was. I like to
Mhm.
look at it. I know the ratchet effect is a very popular way of discussing it, but I like to look at it more like a rubber band. And once you
Mhm.
stretch that rubber band to its limits and you release it, it never goes back to that original shape, that original
Sure.
form. It's now stretched
Right.
out. It's bigger than it was, and there's no getting
Right.
it back. And
Yeah.
so that's what we're dealing with here. And so,
Yeah.
anybody who's taking precautions and doing things that they normally wouldn't do, and which I don't understand. Okay, so I live in the Gulf Coast. We deal with
Mhm.
hurricanes every couple of years. I find it
Right.
just absurd that people are not even the least bit prepared.
I
You know,
know.
I'm like, so
Yep.
in September when Harvey 2.0 shows up, or
Mhm.
another Katrina shows up, you were planning on dying anyway.
Yeah.
You weren't even planning on surviving, or
Yeah.
you were what going to depend on somebody else to take care of you. You
Right.
know, like
You're
it,
you're
it just
absolutely right.
it doesn't make any sense, and I can't think of any part, any place, any city in the country that doesn't deal with some sort of natural disaster, whether it
Yeah.
be heavy snows, flooding, earthquakes, fires. There's something going
Right.
on. That you
Yeah.
have to be prepared for and be prepared to lock
Mhm.
down for a little while.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. I've always got a couple weeks worth of food stashed away, and this whole thing has made me realize I need to maybe put on the prepper hat just a little bit more, um, because you see people's reaction to this, and that's the scariest part. Like the virus is not really scary to me,
hmm
um, but because things like this happen, they come and go, they will pass, and that's not to minimize anyone who's actually injured by it, but it's it's a fact of life that disease happens, right? And so that doesn't really scare me. What scares me is people and their response, and what they will allow of themselves at the slightest fear. And I think you're hitting it right on the head with the people who absolutely should be prepared are so unprepared. And what did that say about the mindset of the everyday average American right now? I mean, they really do have such a short attention span, and people are just living for the day. Not to get on a soapbox, but our grandparents didn't live like that, right? They didn't live on. So many people have massive debt in their lives that they're living on the edge constantly, so that any sort of economic problem takes them into terrible places. And then if you throw something like this on top of it, it can really be devastating for people. The smallest little hiccup in any kind of economic situation. So I thought that maybe the 2007 crash, would wake people up a little bit, but yeah, it doesn't. They get right. The government gets right back into its, for poor fiscal policy and starts doing the things that it always does, and makes the problem. But when the bubble bursts, like right now, they get to blame coronavirus, and people go, oh, it was the virus that caused all the economic problems. And then the government, the state loves that narrative because they get to blame somebody else and continue their terrible fiscal policies and gain more power in the process. So, yeah, I think that you hit it right on the head there with people just not being prepared and not thinking it through, and people who won't prepare for their own safety in their own lives. How in the world are we expecting them to care about fiscal policy? Like if you don't care enough to actually make sure you are, at least as prepared as you can be for, if you live, like you said, on the Gulf Coast and there's going to be a hurricane, at some point the odds are pretty high, and you still don't prepare. Like, these aren't people who are really taking an active role in their own lives and taking responsibility for their own lives. So
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
personal responsibility. They don't.
Mhm.
It's become. I was talking to Scott Horton the other day about this, and I was like, it's
Mhm.
really strange. Like, we were talking about his parents and my parents, and just my dad. My dad's high risk for, if he catches this,
Yeah.
it could do some serious damage to him because he's
Yeah.
diabetic, he's got high blood pressure, and he works retail, and
Yep.
he's not missing work. It's just, that's not in
Wow.
his DNA. That's not who he
Right.
is. And I'm not
Yeah.
gonna preach to him. I mean, like,
Right.
whatever you
He's a
do.
grown man.
Yeah, because the way I look at it, the reason I am an anarchist, the reason that I have the, excuse me one second, smoker's cough. I promise I don't have the Rona. Um, the reason that I am who I am, and take the personal responsibility, and I'm an anarchist, and I look at things the way I look at them, is because of the um, influence of my parents, and
Mhm.
the example that they set for me. I watched my mom go from, my mom has zero college education.
Mhm.
She doesn't even have a GED, and she has
Okay.
worked her way up through the ranks of workman's comp and into safety, and is making, a good chunk of change now. Um,
Right.
and yeah, she took a financial hit because a lot of these companies are, instead of laying people off, they're actually uh, doing salary cuts, and that happened to her.
Right.
But she still makes good money, and they have money set aside. And I've
Right.
watched them in through my entire life, and realized that, hey, if you take the responsibility and you do it, and you go out there and you work, you're gonna get what you need. You're gonna figure
Yeah.
it out. You don't need to be dependent on a third party, whether it's the state or family or whatever.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of what made us, like our generation, what we are. And
Mhm.
so the helicopter parenting and all that stuff that came up
Right.
through the 80s and into the 90s, that has created this soft generation. And I don't mean it to be insulting, but they were comfortable. They had it good. And
Yeah. I,
and so they think that somebody's always going to be there to bail them out. And it's like,
yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think it's just limited to the millennials or the Zoomers. I think they may look to government even more. But I hate to even say that. I'm kind of cautious because the boomers are the people that are looking to government more than anybody. Like that sort of generation brought those ideas in that government should take care of health care and education and everything else. So there's plenty of blame to go around, I guess, is my thinking. But it's funny you say that about your parents, because my parents are very same situation as yours. My mom has got diabetes and high blood pressure, and so she can't really be out. She's retired, but my grandmother lives with them, who has poor kidney function and things like that. So they're staying home, which makes sense, right? Like, this is the part where you're talking about being an anarchist. Each person has to evaluate their level of risk and
mm-hmm.
decide what risk they're willing to take. And for them, it would be incredibly ridiculous for them to be out and about right now, because it could kill them very easily. But somebody like, me, you, my kids, the chances are so much lower. So I don't think that people think of it in those terms about, it's my life and I get to determine and evaluate the risk. Pardon me. And that's like you said, that's essential to being an anarchist, to being a free person. That's essential to say, the same people that would argue that we should be locked in our houses right now are maybe some of those people realize that seatbelt laws are stupid. There's no difference.
Yeah.
There's no difference here. It's the risk that you get to take. And I've seen a lot of people online, saying you could kill somebody's kids or you could kill someone who's elderly that's got an, suppressed immune system. Like, that makes no sense because those people are already prepared for this.
Yeah.
Pardon me, I got a little thing in my throat here.
Hmm.
Um, those people are already prepared. They're already, if you've got a suppressed immune system, if you're immunosuppressed, whatever they call it,
Hmm.
then you've already been preparing for flu season. You already know when it comes around. You already take precautions. Like, I think for me, the thing that makes the most sense is the hospital situation, and because they have regular things that they need to take care of, and I think we're not really hearing about some of the things that are causing hospitals or that are damaging people because their surgeries are getting canceled and things of that nature, where because they're preparing for the influx of coronavirus patients if there is one. So I think the fallout is much wider than we're even going to know because it's affecting other people's care as well.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of nuance to this whole thing, but I've also been hearing where they are counting like people who died of, say, a heart attack, but they when they did an autopsy or blood work or whatever, they found that they had the coronavirus, even though they didn't have any symptoms. They say they died of coronavirus.
Right.
So I don't know how true that is, but I've seen people saying that about people that they, like one person, it was her mother, that happened to, and so I you just have to wonder why they would fudge the numbers, you
Hmm.
know. So there's a lot that goes into it. But all
Yeah.
I know is that we have to retain our principles.
I know my cousin she's a nurse in St. Louis at a hospital in St. Louis, and I know she had talked to my mom. I guess it was last week. My mom had told me about this, and so she said what they're seeing is that's so scary to the medical profession is that some of these people are coming in with very mild symptoms, and they're coming
Yeah.
into the hospital, and then they're having complete organ failure. So it's attacking a different part of their body, like so they end up
Wow.
with kidney failure or something like that. But there's also I read a study last night, and I'm actually reading into it a little bit more. I have a friend of mine who I chat with regularly, who's a medical professional, and he was telling me that there's a biological component within the virus, and I don't know how it all works, so I can't even get into all the details on it.
Sure.
But he's telling me there's like this biological component that is identical to HIV. And so
Really?
there's two different strains of the virus. There's the L strain and the S strain, and then one of them is worse than the other. And one of them is
Hmm.
actually carrying components of HIV. And so it's
Wow.
actually attacking the immune system differently. And so that strain is supposed to be 10 times worse than the other one. And so it's kind of
Wow.
hard to um, separate, like you said earlier. It's hard to really determine what's just propaganda and what's actually, you need to be really concerned with.
Right.
And as a truck driver, we're out here, we're just running. We're just doing what
Right.
we can to keep up. I mean, the freight lines, a lot of these distribution centers are a day behind. I spent
Mhm.
most of last week waiting on loads and didn't drive near as much as I normally drive
Right.
because especially running for Georgia Pacific and paper products and Nestle Waters, they're just behind on orders. I spent nearly 16 hours waiting on a load in Muskogee, Oklahoma, last week. Or
Mm.
a Georgia
Wow.
Pacific load. Now it seems like this week's a little bit smoother, and things seem to be operating a little bit smoother. So the distribution chain seems to be catching up, at least on the logistics side.
Yeah.
I know there's still like I went. It's some of the most ridiculous stuff, and I'm just ranting. I went to the store this weekend. I had to get, my wife makes homemade dog treats for our dogs out of out of chicken gizzards, and
Oh,
oh, they love it.
but they
Anyway,
love that.
oh, they do. They love it. She doesn't want to feed them a bunch of junk. We spend a little bit of
Mhm.
extra money on food and feed them really good food and this, that, and the other because we want our dogs are kind of they're our kids. Especially like the one who normally rides with me. It's kind of like having my best friend with me all the time.
Right.
But
Yeah.
so I went to the store and the produce section completely full. The meat section completely full. You know what I couldn't find?
Hmm.
I couldn't find yeast and flour, but
Right.
I could find self-rising flour. So I got self-rising flour because for some reason my wife who hates to bake decided that this is a perfect time to start baking bread. And so third world living, y'all. And she she's from South Africa, so I make fun of her for being third world.
Yeah.
Um, um, and then all the like the whole chip aisle was empty. I was like, what are you people eating? Like, really?
Right.
That's what you're worried about? I got to get my damn
Yeah.
Doritos and my Cheetos. Like, that's what you're
Yeah.
concerned with? So
I
it's
think people.
really weird.
Yeah, I think people. This is the other thing we sort of touched on it earlier. Is that I really believe people think that this is just going to pass and then the economy's going to start right back up and here we go roaring forward. I don't think that's going to be the case, unfortunately. Most people don't understand that these things have domino effects.
Right.
And when you shut down an entire economy, basically, then you take small businesses out. A lot of small businesses won't be able to weather this,
Mm.
and that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. So, um,
Well, it's a bad thing for the
yeah,
small businesses and for the
yeah,
local economies. But see,
right,
that's exactly the type of thing that the corporations and the bankers depend on.
right.
Don't ever let a
So,
crisis go to waste. They get to get richer while the rest of us get poorer.
right.
And
So,
it's insane.
yeah. So that's not going to be good. And I think that people are just unaware of. Like I was talking to a friend of mine who is he loves almost any good conspiracy that comes along. He's on top of it, even some of the really out there ones. And he was just like, "This is just a joke. This is that. There's nothing. This isn't even a real thing. I haven't known anyone who actually has gotten this or died of it." And I was like, "Well, it's happening. I don't think that it's fake."
Mm.
And the thing that you need to really be concerned about, because he's like, there's nothing, we just need to go on as business as usual. And I'm like, that's, whether this is fake or not, that's not going to happen because they're making economic decisions that are going to crush the economy. This is what you really need to prepare for. This
Hmm.
is why you should be prepared. Because the odds of that you and your family get, I went to high school with them, so we're the same age. It's like the odds that you and your family are going to get sick are very slim. And even if you do, although they do live in Georgia, um, you're probably going to be okay. But the economic stuff, you're not going to be able to escape. Nobody's getting out of that. Like that, none of the regular folk, anyways. We're not getting out of that. So
Hmm.
I think you see evidence clearly of that in all the pork in the relief package, right?
Hmm.
So they make sure their friends get paid, and people are happy. Like they're happy to have their whatever it was, $1,000 or $1,500.
Yeah.
They're happy to have it, and they don't even want to concern themselves right now with the fact that most of that money did not go to people.
Excuse
So setting aside that money is stolen from people in the first place,
me.
even if you just set that completely aside, you're looking at people just selling their liberties for a couple, $1,000 or whatever, and it's really sad, and it's just a band-aid fix because guess what? That's not going to last very long if you have another 30 days of quarantine where you can't work. Um, it's not going to last very long at all. and then you're right back in the same situation, and people are going to be calling for another one. And it really, one of the things that really talked about the generational issue, and I saw mostly younger people saying this online, was when it was first proposed that they were talking about giving people $500 in relief. People all over, like, that's not enough to pay my rent. I don't know who these people think they are. And I'm thinking, wait a second. You act as if you have no onus in your own life. You have no responsibility to take care of your own life. Like, it's amazing how entitled people really are, and the way it comes out in situations like this where, they're incredibly entitled, and they're going to have a harsh wake up. I'm afraid that that's going to happen for them, and it's not going to be pretty, because they weren't told to prepare their own lives and that they're responsible for their own lives.
All right, so I kind of have a little bit of sympathy for these people, and I'll tell you why. Because you got the government, either on the state level or the federal level, coming into the communities and shutting them down and just saying, no, you cannot operate.
Right.
Period. You can't do anything. You're not allowed. You're not essential. Which I think is, I mean, Mike Meharry has an article he posted today, that he published in the Shift Gold website, about how arbitrary it is that the government deciding what is and isn't essential. How can you tell? How can you tell mom and pop that their business isn't essential when it's essential for them to sustain their life? But that's another story all in itself. But the fact of the matter is, the government is forcing these people to shut down, and they're like, okay, well, you're forcing me to shut down, so what are you going to do to make sure that I don't go without? So there's some sort of sympathy I have there, and I find the real disgusting part of it is that, okay, like Thomas Massey had pointed out when he talked to Dave Smith on the last Part of the Problem podcast, the real thing is, this is $6 trillion new into the economy that this quote unquote stimulus bill, gives. And you're talking about the average family of four may receive $3,000 while accumulating a $60,000 debt is what you're doing. So you're basically just saying, okay, we'll pay off some of that federal debt for you. Now, if you really wanted to stimulate, mom and pop and the citizens, all that money would have been going to them. Because where are they going to spend that money? They're going to spend it on the corporations and on their local businesses anyway. The corporations may not have gotten as much money, right? So basically, this is just cronyism at its worst. And it's basically they're saying, you know what? Just to keep you pacified and to shut you people up so that we can bribe our big business buddies out there, in the stock market, we're going to give you some crumbs so that we can give them filet mignon, and that's what I'm seeing. And I'm like, okay, I don't like this whole $1,200 stimulus. I think it's ridiculous, and I think it's bad economics. But at the same time, like, I don't hate these people for it. I hate are the politicians who are propping up their buddies. That's who I hate.
Right. You can't blame them for being who they've been trained to be.
Right. Like, exactly.
Like, I look back at myself, and I can't believe some of the things I used to, believe. But, I go, okay, well, that's you only could go so far. So yeah, you can't blame people for only doing what they know. It's just the fact that I think this is going back to something we were talking about earlier, sort of the mentality between, say, our grandparents, our parents, and our generation, and the one two after us, is that, the thing with the government and looking to them to help, in harsh quotes, is that nobody wants to have a little bit of suffering now.
Right.
They're ready to kick it down the road. And every time you kick it down the road, you get to now 2020, where there comes an end of the road, and we may be at the end of the road, where you just can't kick it anymore. And you compound all that bad. You just keep compounding it and compounding it until when it really comes down, it's such a huge house of cards that it just everything collapses. So I think that's the, when we look at Austrian economics, you see the cycle of how things go, and sometimes you're going to have points where things aren't as great, and if you just let the market work it out, the suffering is so much smaller. It's much more manageable, and it's more easily overcome, so that it's not really terrible at all. But when you put in these false solutions and fixes that just they fix it for now, that benefits politicians, and so that's why they do it. But you're selling your kids out, you're selling your grandkids and your great grandkids out.
Right.
So I as much as I hate that people are going to suffer from, most likely from this economic situation, it has to happen. And hopefully, I guess if there's any bright side to this, is that as libertarians, we can offer solutions.
Right.
We can offer real solutions to people, and especially once the fear dies down, I think you're going to see people, some people at least, maybe more willing to take a look at, well, where the government failed, which they made this whole thing in so many different categories and ways worse.
Mm-hmm.
And we can. I like that that phrase, "Be the change you wish to see in the world," that you've heard so many times. Well, this is our time. This is the libertarian time to actually be that change, to start helping in your community, start things that once we're all financially. I'm not. Nobody is. They're not obligated to do these kinds of things, but I think most libertarians care about their communities and the world, and we want to offer solutions that aren't based on government. So we can have an eye towards looking to that. What kind of services, what kind of things can we fill in the market that would help people be able to, do what they need to do, but do it without the government. That's where I think we can really be the bright side in this whole thing. So that's what I'm trying to do, and build communities, like build your community of like-minded individuals. That's so important, not only because everybody needs someone who understands them, right? Who gets them. You don't have to explain yourself every time you speak to someone. Like we all know that feeling, because if you're a radical politically, it's very difficult to find people who get you sometimes. But you should cultivate those and nurture those relationships, because not only will it be better for you and your mental health, but when stuff really does go bad, you have people that you can rely on, that you have a similar way of viewing the world, and that'll make things a lot easier, and you can help each other out. That's part of being human, is being in parts of communities. So
yeah,
I think that's a really important aspect.
Okay, so I want to kind of expand on that, because this is kind of the original purpose of me getting in touch with you the other day. Is everybody's talking about, I mean, I had Mike on, and Mike Meharry, and we talked about the bust and the business cycle and the Federal Reserve and all that, and everybody's talking about all these intricate details that the average person doesn't even pay attention to. But
Right.
you're a mother, and you're well known, at least within the circle that I communicate with. You're well known as kind of the libertarian mother, and so how are you approaching your children as far as making sure that they understand what the future, how to shore up their future, and how to
Right.
ensure that they have some security in the future? How are you approaching this, knowing that there are changes coming that are unforeseen?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think for one, it depends on your kids. Who your kids are, and how resilient they are, and hopefully we've some people are just more naturally have anxiety more than other people, that kind of thing. But with my kids, they're both pretty resilient. I've tried to teach them that hard things are going to come in life, you know, and that's just the way it is, and you can't sit around and think of the what ifs. You just got to get busy with what is. And I have such a wide spread that my approach is different between my two kids. So my son, who is 17, you know, he's working, he's seeing more of this, he's out in the world, he has his own interactions with people and their different thoughts. And at first, when this was all happening, he was really like, this is just going to blow over, this is no big deal, I don't know why you're preparing, you know, you don't need to go out and buy, you know, more food and whatever. And I'm like, well, you might be right? Like, you could be right. It could just all blow over. I don't think that's the case, but you could be right, but it's better to prepare than not. So it's always better to know that you are doing what you can at least than to do nothing and then have nothing. So that's he's a little bit more shall we say dark. He tends towards the negative a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
he's
so
like me, he's a cynic.
Yeah, a cynic. He's very stoic. He's very cynical. He's a great kid. He's got a brilliant mind. But you know, he's young, and I think that's the best thing we can do for people. You know, who I've seen a little bit more life at this point, and I know that things don't always work out the way they look like they're going to, or we think they will. So, just with him, I've been trying to take the approach of, look, you just work while you can, do what you can, and we'll figure it out. We will, you know, we're a team. I always look at our family as a team, and that we are in it for each other. You know, I'm not going to allow him to suffer or whatever. He wants to move out on his own when he's 18, and I've tried to discourage him from that because I think he should stay home for a little bit longer and just save money. But now he might have to, and we're just looking at that, and I'm saying, look, that's life. Sometimes things happen that we don't like, and situations, our plans get changed. But it's a good learning experience for someone who is more inflexible, and it's hard for them to roll with the punches sometimes to get that and go, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about this, so sitting around and being upset about it doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to deal with what is, and you know, I'm not, like, when I say keep a positive attitude, it's not like Pollyanna, like, oh, we're just going to be fine. But, you know, you can approach things from either a negative or positive approach, and I tend to choose the positive because I find that the negative gets in my way. And it doesn't help me think clearly. It doesn't help me, you know, I hate to even say that, just because so many people have used that in a terrible way where they're using it to be unprepared and to be, you know, pie in the sky sort of thinking. That's not where I'm coming from. I just think you can look at things with even if they're concerning things, you can hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, sort of that kind of mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
And then with my daughter, you know, she's only 9, so her concerns are completely different. And I feel like, as, you know, my son at 17, I talk to him as the young man that he is. I don't need to hide or shelter him from any of this.
Mm-hmm.
But with her, I let her know what she needs to know, and then I let her be a kid.
Yeah.
But we talk about it too. We talk about, you know, things that are happening and why, especially if they come up. And it's a little scary for her at times, but I try not to, because it doesn't do her any good to be scared. Mm-hmm. And I don't want her living in fear. She's 9. There's not much she can do about it anyways. Mm-hmm. It's not in her hands to prepare or anything like that. So, you know, I just try to approach things very lighthearted with her, but also be as honest with her as I can. And she's a very precocious young lady, and she's quite intelligent. So she knows a lot more than maybe some other kids, but she's very resilient. She's a very resilient person, just naturally. So she kind of she's really flexible and rolls with the punches pretty easily. So it's just different because of her age and her personality. But I haven't really talked to her all that much about it. I've just been reminding her, well, yeah, we're not going to go, you can't go hang out with your friends this week. You know, they're staying at home and everybody's kind of just hunkering down a little bit and letting this pass. Um, so I don't know if that's actually helpful at all. But it's what I've been doing. And I think we just, the best thing we can do is be the best parents we can be all the time.
Hmm.
And, I'm far from the best parent in the world, but I do my best to let my kids understand that they, like they have a great deal of responsibility in their own lives, and they also have well, I guess so they have a lot of responsibility, and I want them to be able to take care of themselves as much as possible. And those things, if we do that enough in regular life, when the time comes that they really have to hear something hard or know something hard, live through something hard, then I think they're able to weather it better. Because I don't pretend that life is always easy or fun, or that nothing bad will ever happen to you. I guess that's the biggest thing, is that I don't always tell my kids, like, nothing bad is never going to happen to you. You're always going to be okay, because that's just not the way life goes. But teaching them how to live through things, I think, is really important, and live with, not disappointments and things we can't control. We just have to deal with them.
Yeah, yeah, and that's see, as a truck driver, I'm gone a lot, and but yeah, as we were talking about before we started recording, I've tried to shore up my wife at home, and we have a little bit. We have like 8 and 3/4 acres, almost 9 acres. We have a
Mhm.
pond. We have wild animals that run around. So I made sure she's able to kill food if necessary, which she probably won't do, because
Right.
she loves, she just can't bring herself to do it. But
Yeah.
but
You get
there.
hungry enough, you can.
Yeah,
They'll figure it out.
I think so too. She could always send one of the three dogs out to kill for her too. But I'm looking at the potentiality of the economy never correcting, especially with them talking about moving to a digital dollar and things like that. So
Mhm.
we have a little bit of cash on us. We're not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but we've been operating in the gray market for a couple of years now, and
Mhm.
we've actually been able to get a little bit of cash, and that might be of value, um,
Right.
being in cash. And we're also looking at ways that we can expand, our ability to operate within a gray market. And so
Mhm.
we're taking steps in order to do that. But I have 5 kids. I also have one granddaughter, and
Mhm.
I'm being kind of a, I guess you could call it an absentee father by necessity more than
Right.
desire, because of
Sure.
the having to afford to pay child support and having to be out here on the road all the time. It makes it really difficult for me dealing with my kids, because I'm trying to I'm trying to give them advice but not step on their mom's toes, and I'm trying to communicate with their mom
Sure.
and find out what she's doing and what's going on there, and trying to give her some whatever advice, and let her know, like, look, we have room at our
Mhm.
place if the kids need to get out of the city, because they all live in Houston, which is
Mm.
not
Yeah.
where I would want to be at this point in time.
Sure.
So
Right.
it makes it a little difficult for me, and so I'm trying to, like, just kind of nudge in the right direction, like, hey, maybe get outside and you know let the kids plant a garden or something like that. Like
Right.
like
Yeah.
make sure that you know they're doing something productive and they're getting out there and in nature, and the natural antioxidants of the sun are actually boosting their immune system, things like that.
Right.
Don't just keep them locked up,
Yeah.
in the house like little prisoners. So I'm trying to nudge them in the right direction, without
Right.
being too forceful, and that's a
Yeah,
that's a
lots of people
balancing
are in
act.
that situation, and all you can do is encourage and cultivate that relationship because making a you're not married for a reason, right? And so making that relationship functional is really important. And I think that's the best thing we can do is prepare kids to
Mm,
who are responsible, like to do all the good parenting things that we know already. Those are the things that will sustain our kids. And I always tell my kids, like, I'm not going to be around forever. I'm not going to be here to tell you what to do.
right.
Even I mean, I don't mean just being dead. Like, I'm not with my kids 24 hours a day. So,
Hmm.
you have to know how to make good decisions. So I think teaching kids how to think and how to be resourceful, and use ingenuity. I think those things are really important, and a lot of that comes with just allowing them to live their lives and have some failures, and you know go not helicopter them, right? Like let them actually have consequences for their actions in life and things like that. Where I have a really really responsible 17-year-old, and he's basically treated as an adult in my house because he makes really good decisions.
Hmm.
And I won't say that that's all because of the parenting that he's had, because he's a kind of a naturally responsible person too. But I will take a little credit for that, and say I've helped to cultivate that. Um, and I think he can be trusted to do that.
Right.
And that's what we really want. You want to be. I'm raising adults. I've always looked at raising my kids as raising adults. I want them to be able to enjoy their lives because thankfully we live in a time where kids don't have to work. My great grandparents were working at like 5, stuff like
Hmm.
that. And I'm thankful my kids haven't had to do that. But they could if they needed to, right? That's what I want. I want kids who are able to recognize and not feel sorry for themselves, but recognize reality and go, okay, let's do it. Let's
Hmm.
let's do what we got to do. And that's a really important mindset that will take you through your whole life. And because you can't prepare for every eventuality, but you can prepare as far as being, raising your kids to be the kind of people that are resilient and that can figure out what they need to do and make good decisions. And that's probably the most important thing we can do because they're smart, they can figure out a lot of things on their own,
Hmm.
but you have to give them that foundation. And I think that's, it's good what you're talking about, having to plant a garden and things like that. It's an awesome thing for kids to do. It teaches you so much about responsibility and reward and hard work. And like you were saying, that's the kind of example my parents set for me. I grew up when I was very small. We were homeless several times, and it was a bad situation. My mom worked very very hard, and then she met my stepdad, and they both worked very hard to continue their trajectory towards the middle class, and that's given my siblings and I a better boost in life than we would have had otherwise. So, I think we're all hopefully upwardly mobile, generally, and even in times when things are not looking so good, hopefully we can, use our wits and make the best decisions so that we can keep our families moving forward and not falling apart.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we're hitting at about an hour, and we're having. It
Okay.
seems like I'm having a little bit of a reception issue.
Yeah,
The
it's in
wind.
and out.
Yeah, the wind's kicking up here, and which is weird because we're in Louisiana. It's not like I'm in Chicago or Oklahoma.
Right.
But yeah, the wind's kicking up here, and as every time the wind gusts, I can tell that it's kind of breaking up a little bit. But so, you got any final thoughts?
Hmm. I would say, yeah, just I think one of the things you said during the beginning of the interview is the most important, is that not to let fear be the thing that guides you. Don't be subject to your fear. Always keep your logic or your emotions subject to your logic. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do and that we can set an example for our children to do. And that doesn't mean that there aren't things to be afraid of. It just means that even if there is something to be afraid of, that we're going to not let our emotions override our good sense. And I think that's probably one of the best things we could ever do for ourselves or our children, and not buy into the hysteria just because everyone's hysterical,
Hmm.
but actually, take a minute and get yourself together. And like I said, I still don't exactly know what to believe about all this. And that in itself is, I don't like that feeling,
Hmm.
but I know that there are certain things that I can do, um, and to take care of myself, my mental health, whatever. I pull back occasionally from social media, or I'll just have a day where I'm only going to post funny stuff, and play games with people. Just keep doing that. And while everyone's so tense, try and hang out with your friends. If you have to do it over Skype or whatever, I've been doing live streams and just kind of hang out with people and bring the level of stress down, because when we're not so stressed out, we can generally think more clearly. So I guess
Right.
those are my only final words.
Yeah, I actually really concern myself with the way people are going to be reacting about this, in a few weeks, and
Mhm.
especially if they're still locked down, and just the insanity that is going to overcome people from being shut out of society and not functioning
Mhm.
within society, and the unrest that may ensue, especially
Yeah.
in the cities, where there's millions of people. But yeah, so that kind of concerns me. Is just how are people going to be reacting? Because I don't foresee the government um, lifting all these restrictions anytime soon. I think it'll get worse
Yeah.
before it gets better. But all right,
Sometimes it's how it goes.
yeah, yeah, it's growing pains, man. That's just how life goes,
Yeah.
man. But tell everybody where they can find you, since you're hard to find anymore.
Right. Right. Well, I have the Sherry Voluntary show page is still up. I'm not currently doing new shows. I don't know that I'll go back to that show, but this, your interview and other interviews of me will be on there. And I would still love the subs on YouTube, because I can still monetize that page if I get enough subs. So
Hmm.
you can find me there, and then just Facebook, Sherry Voluntary, Twitter, Instagram, all those things. I'm always around. I'll be at if it doesn't get canceled, which it's looking like it's going to keep going. Freedom Fest 2020 in Las Vegas. I'll
Okay.
be there July 13th through 16th. At some point, there will be a panel on voluntarism, anarchism that I'm going to be on. So
Oh, nice.
I'm looking forward to that. You can find me there. And funnybroke.com is my new venture with my partner, business partner, Alan Mosley, who does the gold standard, and we co-host postcards from Somalia together. Pardon me. We have started a new network. We're going more towards entertainment now.
Hmm.
We're still being ourselves, but just branding in a way that we can maybe get more, wider audience. So
Yeah.
that's where you can find us.
All
Sunny
right.
Broke on Facebook.
I still think Postcards from Somalia is still the best name for a podcast ever.
Yeah, we do too.
It cracks me up every time I smile every time I say it.
Yep.
Uh,
It was a stroke of genius.
yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Okay.
Thanks
Well, I'm
so
gonna let
much.
you go.
Thanks for having me, Tommy. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. All right. That was Sherry Voluntary. I'm Tommy Salmons. Late.